Hi there, good evening and welcome to your Sunday show. My name's Scott Patterson, live on this Sunday, the 7th of September, across on the Four Lads Had a Dream Network. Very welcome. It's probably bizarre to join us on a Sunday night after having such a good weekend. However, I'm conscious it's international break, so we'll get into that and all the good things that go alongside it. Joining me to discuss quite an interesting one tonight. What we're going to cover is the assess. Actually, I'll introduce the guys first and then I'll tell you what we're going to cover. Dougie, how are you doing?
I'm good. As you said, it's a refreshing change that we don't have a weekend ruined by Rangers. So I'm in a fairly good mood, and Mrs. Doogie's happy as well because we managed to get a wee date day. Well, I'm in a good mood for one, but with no Rangers, it meant we could go on a date day yesterday, and then today she's made me do DIY, which is why I've kind of shunted my desk a wee bit over here so nobody can see my newly painted wall.
and joining, and I'm conscious we're missing one, by the way. However, I don't know how Rob looks, and no, I'll not go there. Rob, how you doing?
I'm good, mate. Thank you. I like Dougie said, it's great to have a weekend that hasn't been ruined by the football. But as you can see, we're all smiling for a change, which is nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Sheryl is just taking the night off, guys. She will be back, so settle yourself down and whatever fashion you choose to do that.
What if we will need to address this and sit on the floor or something in front of a sofa just to kind of pretend that Cheryl's with us in spirit?
I'll
pretend I've got the wine under here and just
on a drip. Goodness me. Right, listen, let's get on with it then. What we are going to discuss tonight for the next 45 minutes to an hour or so, the assessment of the block so far. We get muddled in about the blocks up to the international break. We'll talk about the first block under Russell Martin. We'll also speak about the Kevin Thelwell interview, which was announced via the club during the week. A couple of interesting little bits and pieces and we will also discuss the two home games that the team come out of the international break on. Both really quite important for, I nearly said impossible there, goodness me, and both quite important for two really very different reasons. Dougie, I'm going to start with you. We don't need to go into the sort of match by match assessment of the block. Rob and I were speaking before you arrived, and if you go back to when the fixtures were announced, you probably looked at that opening block in your commas and you're thinking, we should be able to take 9 points for this, surely.
Good to start with your favourite this week, Scott.
Sheryls not here.
Hey, the chat's already started with the calendar, but we'll stay well clear of that. We'll have a professional podcast this week. Yeah, I think I said it in the last Sunday show that we had together that we did have a favourable start to the league campaign. So it's unfortunate that we're not sitting at maximum points. We are undefeated. If we look at the positive side of it, I don't think anyone's looking at the positive side of it, to be honest. It's not been a good enough start, and I won't go through blow by blow, but I think what we've covered in previous pods is every Rangers fan recognised it was going to be a transition. There was going to need to be a bit of time given to Russell Martin and his new squad to gel together and embed a new playing system. I think the disappointing thing, I think it was Rob that said it last time, I think the disappointing thing is there's been no glimmers of any positivity to just grab onto. And that needs to change, right? We're about to go into two big games against the Edinburgh teams, one league, one cup. We need to be fighting all trophies. It's unthinkable that we drop points again against Hearts, and it's unthinkable that we go out of a cup competition so early in the campaign. So we need to turn this around and turn it around quickly.
Rob, I'm of a certain vintage, without calling myself old, I'm of a certain vintage where I find it quite amazing to think that I'm going to get into the second week in September and not seeing Rangers win domestically in any of the games that I've went by previous. I'm not sure it's happened. Well, the people that know better than me, the historians, will know that it's been a long time. Davy Herd is probably yelling at his laptop right now, saying when it was, but it's been a long time since we have had this studginess, if you like, this slowness, this kind of, it feels like you're running in treacle a wee bit watching them, doesn't it?
It does, and I think, like Dougie said, I think for me, I was hoping that the turning point was going to be Pilsen. at home, because actually there was like 70 minutes of really good football. You could see something starting to come together, but then after that game, it just seemed to go downhill and get worse. And I think it's that balance. He's obviously trying to turn over a number of players in a squad that needed it, but equally you've got to get results while you're doing that, because we're at a club that demands that you win every game that you play in. And I think that's probably been the frustrating thing from the first bank of fixtures. Don't get me wrong, getting past Panathinaikos and securing the league stages of European football was a great positive for those first kind of group of fixtures. I think the disappointing thing was obviously in the Bruges performance, and the fact that we knew the humping was coming, and it did come against them, unfortunately. And I think it's that lack of pragmatism that has probably frustrated a lot of Rangers fans, that you could see big gaps in the team, and it's taken him to the Celtic game to actually realise that he's going to have to tweak things a little bit. And defensively, we looked a lot more solid at that point. Yeah. So the frustration as a fan is, if you recognise that and seen it for the Celtic game, where was that in the other fixtures early on in the season? And I think whether the manager is too stubborn to admit that maybe he's got stuff wrong, this is where Hearts Onward is going to be pivotal in his career as Rangers manager, if he wants to have one. Because for us, every fan recognises that there was going to be a period of change and there was going to be pain, as he likes to put it. But while you're going through that, you've still got to deliver results. It doesn't matter if it's free-flowing attacking football. It's the just fake win it, and I think that's the mentality that's been missing over this first block of fixtures, and I guess the frustration of many Rangers fans. I think we would have stomached it had we seen more wins, but the fact that we've had nothing to grasp onto apart from that, 60 or 70 minutes of football across all those games, it's not good enough.
No, not at all. I'm going to stay with you, Rob, because we're instantly right. And I was actually going to say, if you want to do a Q&A in the comments tonight, guys, by all means, get them in here. But Tommy's Cardigan, I've no idea where that name comes from. If Russell Martin, and I'll stay with you, Rob, if Russell Martin changes to two up top, based on what we know what happened on deadline day, Majowski coming in just ahead the Old Firm game, and then Chermiti coming in sort of last day, and I think it's a really great point. One of the things I think has been levelled against Russell Martin since he's came up is his reluctance to change system, his reluctance to maybe think, I need to rip this up and start again. I do need to start. Tommy's absolutely spot on. Does that mean all the work on the training ground since he came in all those weeks ago is effectively gone, and needs to look to kick off again?
I think like everything, you've got to be adaptable as a team and as a manager. And ultimately, the best example that we've got from my generation was Walter. You look at how many times he would maybe play different players in different positions and different systems across different series of games. So for me, the work shouldn't be wasted on the training pitch, because ultimately it's about being comfortable with the ball, it's about moving it quickly, even though we haven't seen that happening very much. And it should be just tactical positioning tweaking if you are going to change to that type of system, because ultimately your defenders need to defend, midfielders need to keep the game ticking over, and your strikers need to put the ball in the back of the net. That's ultimately as simple as football should be. And I think sometimes, I was talking to somebody about this with the example when we played St Mirren. They had 11, 13 new players in their squad as well, but it comes down to simplicity of message. Stevie Robinson is probably not trying to boil the ocean like Russell Martin is at the moment, with getting his ideas across to the team. And if you focus on building blocks and doing it bit by bit, you're probably going to get better results over the longer term. So it might take him a little bit longer, but actually your players will gradually get, more comfortable with what the manager's asking them, regardless of what formation they're going to be playing on the pitch. And I think that's what it comes down to. It depends on how complex he's trying to be with the message that he's given the players. And he always talked about there's a lot of information that these players are going to take it in. Let's face it, in work, the more complicated somebody makes it for you, the less attention you're going to pay. You need to keep it in bite-sized chunks so that people understand it, digest it, put it into action, and then you can give them more information to build on it. So I wouldn't say necessarily that the work on the, or it shouldn't be that the work on the pitch has been lost, but ultimately it's also up to the players, because some of the players have got to take responsibility for their performances once they step on the pitch, regardless of instruction manager gives them. They shouldn't get missed in this either. It's them that need to chase back. It's them that need to cover their man. It's them that go into the tackles, 50-50s or whatever, to go and win that ball. You can't coach that, and you can't coach that heart and hunger. And if the players don't have it, that's a bit of a different problem, given how many players we've turned over during the summer.
Dougie, do you think that a tweak on the existing system, so the system that we've seen since Motherwell to current day, I think Rob's absolutely right. We've saw an hour of relatively decent, exciting stuff. Came at a really nice night, I have to say. It was great when it lasted. However, we've not seen any evidence of it since then. Do you think a change of system, a change of shape would help the existing players? As Rob says, that, you know, and this is something I've thought for a long time. I thought it was Michael Beale, Giovanni before him, Philippe Clement, that the managers have a responsibility to a degree. However, when the minute the players take responsibility and cross the white line, I know it's pithy, however, they have a responsibility to themselves to sort of follow out instructions and do what they've been working on all week. I do wonder if a change and a tweak, perhaps, in the way they're playing would help some of the guys in and around that system just now.
There's a lot of factors to discuss here, though, that probably just have gone slightly under the radar. So, you know, the comment around ripping everything up after pre-season, one of the things that was just in my head when I seen that is I wonder how many of these new players were actually at pre-season, because to my mind, a lot of the guys that came in have actually came in after. You know, we're talking about Asgard was there, for example, but Gassama wasn't. And Gassama's one of the guys that's hit the ground running for us. He was kind of like at the tail end of the pre-season point. So pre-season is really important because that's your opportunity to get players fit. It's your opportunity to get your ideas across. I seen another comment basically saying I don't think we'll necessarily change his core principles. He might slightly tweak the formation, but his core principles will remain the same in terms of keeping possession, allowing players to come on to you, and then moving it fast when players do come on to you, all those kind of things. That won't change, even if we slightly tweak the formation. There has been a few tweaks in formation. Celtic, we actually played a 4-2-3-1 in my eyes against Celtic, so there was a slight tweak there. And I think it needs to be based on who's available and the opposition that you're playing against. You know, we couldn't have went 4-3-3 against Celtic. You'd have exposed Conor Barron for one, but I actually don't think Asgard and Diomande, who are two of your strongest central midfielders, can play in the more advanced areas on either side because they're both left-footed. I think there's a slight imbalance in that regard as well. And I think you could get a better balance if you play a 4-2-3-1 with Diomande and Raskin as the sitters and Asgard slightly further ahead of them. And from what I've seen from Asgard so far as well, he's probably not somebody who works as hard off the ball as the likes of Nico Raskin, and therefore you might be asking him to do a slightly different role in a 4-2-3-1 as you would in a 4-3-3, because he wouldn't need to do as much chasing back in a 4-2-3-1 potentially, because you're asking Raskin and Diomande to do that. But there will be other games. You know, it's probably not Hearts, it's probably not Hibs, but there's probably games when you think back to earlier this season with your Motherwells and your Dundees, that a 4-4-2 might work better because teams are going to sit in the low block. We need to have more guys in the box. One of my biggest frustrations so far this season, you know, you can talk about the attitude, the endeavour. We're really slow and moving the ball. We're not moving as much. There's a lot of things like that happening. But one of my main observations, you can only score goals if you've got guys in the box. And wherever we are going forward, there's a real absence of players actually in the box. So 4-4-2 gives you that as well, especially with Miovski in particular, who's a proven goal scorer in this league. I think Shermity, which we'll probably come on to, is a little bit of an unknown, and it's a lot of money to spend on an unknown. I think the luxury that Miovski gives Shermity is Miovski is somebody who should be able to hit the ground running because he knows the league. He should be able to, you know, he played against Celtic straight away. I think he was only here a day before he played against Celtic. That takes a little bit of the pressure off Shermity as well, because nobody's going to be shouting that Shermity needs to get into that team straight away if Miovski hits the ground running, which hopefully he does. I'm sure we'll talk about Shimity in a minute, but no, I think there's a lot of factors around why we've potentially not seen our best. It's funny, like, I typically hate international breaks, but I think this international break probably came at a really good opportunity because the window closed. You've got guys like Miovski, Shimity and Cornelius just in the door. Everything that was kind of addressed at pre-season with the guys who weren't there, hopefully that allows Russell Martin to sit down and actually show it to the guys who are there. I think the unfortunate thing is that there's a couple of players away on international duty. Miovski started tonight, for example. Yeah. Cornelius impressed on, I think it was yesterday he played, he impressed as well. So it's probably a shame there's a few players away on international duty, but for the guys that are still here, it'll be important time on the training field with the manager.
Rob, transfer deadline day. What did we not do that you wish we did do?
Left back. I still think we're light in that area. I think another midfielder would have been good, but not really essential given that the Raskin situation settled down and it came out that he was going to be staying at the club, because I think that's good for us at least in the next 6 months if he can get back in the team and get back to the form that he was shown towards the back end of last year. And the way that Aaron's has started the season, and the fact that we all want to have phased out, but he still remains the best right back that we've got at the club, you'd maybe want a bit of cover there. To be honest, I don't think there was probably much more else we could have done with the amount of turnover we had anyway.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest gap that we've got at that moment is that left back position, because Magoma is actually come in and impressed. I think his endeavour, the work rate, he can whip a good ball in. He's been overlapping, and him and Gassam have been building a decent relationship up on that left-hand side. But it's the danger is you lose him, well then either trying to shoehorn Tav into left back, Aaron's at left back, or asking a left-sided centre-half to play at left back, which isn't really going to give us many options. So that's the only area that I think, obviously, the fee and the fact that he's not had many games, Chamiti, the jury's going to be out, because you could quite easily argue that we're probably a little bit weaker in the striking area. You know, we've lost Dessler's goals, and as much as he was a frustrating player, he was always available. He always had the right attitude. He always put himself in the position to at least score. Yep. So you depending on how Chamiti goes, if he hits the ground running, happy days, then that's nothing to worry about. But you could say we're probably lacking a little bit because Danilo just looks so far off it at the moment. And Miovski, I think, will be a great signing for us. You've seen in moments in the Old Firm what we've missed in a striker, where he's back in our third of the half, starting a move, and then he's in the box trying to get in the end of it. I don't think you get that from a Danilo when he's on the pitch. So probably still a little bit light, I think, but the left back area is the most glaring position, I think, where we could start just now. So interesting really interesting you mentioned Raskin, because I think that played a huge, that was a wild couple of weeks almost leading up to transfer deadline day, and I think a lot of people expected Nico Raskin to be departing, and I don't think people even really know now if he's still in contract talks, if he's pals with Russell Martin, if they're talking, if they're not talking. I don't think he's obviously not on national duty now. I'm almost certain he's playing at the moment, or at least involved in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. Rob, I just wonder, how do you think that's been dealt with from every angle? And Dougie, I'll come back to you in the same question in a second. But Rob, I just wonder if you think that there are wee things that could have been better from every perspective: the club, Nico, his agent, his dad. Go. Absolutely. I mean, I think you're always going to get two sides to every story. I think if we take all emotion out of it, at the start of the season, I think most Rangers fans would say he needs to sign on for another year or two, or he needs to be sold in the summer, because we cannot go into a January or a next summer with him then only having 12 months on his contract, because the fee that you can command is potentially going to be less than it is just now. From his point of view, I think it would have been daft for him to move anyway in the summer, because he's looking to break into the Belgian World Cup squad. You wouldn't leave a club where you're guaranteed almost first team football But again, as we've seen with Igaman, agents can be very disruptive in that place. So we don't know what's been happening from an agent standpoint and whether he's been trying to engineer a move on Nico's behalf. I think the one thing that has become clear from various sources is Nico simply loves the club, wants to stay. If he does, the first thing that Thelwell should be doing is looking to get him tied down on a at least 12-month extension to take that 1 foot out the camp perception with Martin and get him committed to the club. He should be playing in the team. The situation before the transfer window only hurt Rangers. We were weaker as a team without him in it. He wasn't playing at his best. But again, it comes back to systems and potentially being exposed. And I think it's a couple of, Barry Ferguson and Neil McCann have said that Nico could be challenging to manage. Barry Ferguson was a born winner. He was challenging to manage. Yeah. Ultimately, if people need to be grown up enough to accept criticism or accept questioning of their methods. And if we've got a manager that is that worried about people questioning him, that actions are taken to effectively drop people and kind of move them out of the team, then that says more about him than it does the player that it's happening to. We'll never know the full story, but as long as Nico's committed, as long as he's fit, he's a player that we really should have been building a team around if we could get him to sign an extension, because he showed last year that he's got it in him. For us now, it's just making sure that they do have that open and frank conversation, because obviously there was no relationship breakdown, remember, because how can a relationship break down if it's always open and honest? So as long as that is the case, knock their heads together, get them back on the bloody football pitch and sort out all the contract stuff as an aside. And I think obviously during Thelwell's interview, he alluded to as much. Nico's still a Rangers player. When he comes back, there has to be a conversation. And he obviously raised the Belgian World Cup thing as well. And I think that would be the angle of the club, is to say, look, you want to play, you want to make that squad, sign this extension for a year. We'll sell you in the summer or next year, but we'll do something, whatever it takes to get him to play. I think we've got to do now.
Dougie, we need a fit and raring to go Nico Raskin, I think, more often than not, in the starting lineup. Do you not?
There's just so many different parts of the Nico Raskin story throughout the entire summer. Nico Raskin won Player of the Year last year because he was our best player. There is absolutely a place in that team for Nico Raskin, and arguably against Celtic, you missed a wee bit of what Raskin brings in terms of that energy and aggression. Nico Raskin should be in our starting 11, but I've spoken about it throughout the Sunday show all season so far. You could argue that Nico Raskin doesn't suit Russell Martin's system. Russell Martin perhaps doesn't see him as the 8 because he wants the 8s to be quite effective in the final third, whilst Nico Raskin gives you a lot of energy and great off the ball. Sometimes on the ball, he's not as effective, potentially, as what the manager hopes Asgard becomes. Meanwhile, at number 6, I think I've mentioned this before, one is passing ability lets him down because he doesn't have the kind of long-range passing that potentially Russell Martin's looking for. But he does cover a lot of ground, and actually when you're covering a lot of ground, that kind of leaves that space between midfield and defence sometimes quite exposed. So there's maybe a part here around whether he actually suits the manager's system or not. But there's so many other factors to it. Rob's touched on it already. Nico Raskin has to sign a new contract. We're now really in danger. We've got, we're going to go into January with him only having 18 months of his contract left. Other clubs will know that. That instantly devalues Nico Raskin, regardless of how he's doing for Belgium, because of his contract situation. We needed to sort that. There's then the comments about his attitude, his behaviours behind the scenes. We're not privy to what is being said and what is happening behind the scenes. It's difficult to know whether he's a natural born winner who's challenging everyone behind the scenes. And you can go back to the Mark Warburton and Joey Barton scenario where Joey Barton said that Mark Warburton was just very weak, that he couldn't handle somebody challenging players and wanting to get the best out of the players, right? We don't know if that's the nature of the challenging nature of Nico Raskin, or is he a cheeky chappy? You know, behind the scenes, he's not necessarily a hard worker. You look at some training videos and he is jumping on people's backs, for example, right? You don't know what it is behind the scenes that's making it difficult to work with. But one thing that you would say, right, is we're all sitting here saying he's a winner. He's not won a lot at Rangers. Now, you can never point to one player and say that's because of you, or, you know, we need to see more from you. But I'm not seeing guys being natural winners behind the dressing room because we're not winning trophies. And we've had this conversation so many times around James Tavernier having a very light medal collection. So does Nico Raskin. So why can we sit there and say, on one hand, that James Tavernier doesn't deserve to be captain because he doesn't have the trophies, but Nico Raskin's our best player and we should be absolutely 100% behind him? And in some cases, people were calling for the manager's head over that situation for a guy who also hasn't won a lot of trophies. So what I would say on Nico Raskin, right, is, my opinion, he's our best midfielder. In my opinion, we're a better team with him. In my opinion, he needs to sign a new contract. In my opinion, he is a future Rangers captain. But I tell you something, for him to be described as a winner, he needs to start winning trophies.
Sunday show on the Four Lads Network is brought to you by iSport Media this season. We're grateful for their help and their assistance for looking after us as the season goes by. Don't forget, we're also being looked after by Black Rooster, CSD Air Conditioning, Clydeview Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions and Rhino Express, all assisting us to do things like this on a weekly basis. And of course, the build-up to the next domestic game, Hearts at Ibrox next Saturday, starts tomorrow with Steve and the team Monday night. Dougie, I remember listening to Russell Martin post-match at the Celtic game, and this will take us quite nicely into Kevin Thelwell, but the comments probably directly about something that Russell Martin said. And I think he was speaking to the Beeb, actually, and he said the question was if we were looking at the boy Chermiti from Everton. And the reply from Russell Martin was, he's someone that Kevin and Dan know well. I just wonder if that's something that should give us the shivers a wee bit, if Russell Martin didn't know our new nine after the club have spent £8 million on him.
You're trying to get me to put £5 in the swear jar for saying red flag, aren't you? So, listen, there's two sides to this, right? Rob and I have had this argument on the
discussion, not argument, discussion.
Do we have discussions? So we've had this discussion, right, around the comment from Kevin Thelwell, and there's two sides to it, right? On one side, you've got a new leadership team, right? Thelwell and Purdy in particular, who are identifying the players. They've came in when the window's open. They need to act fast. What they need to do when they act fast is use the market that they know and sign the players that they know, right? So on one hand, I get that, right? And that's what we've done. We've primarily shopped in the English market. The issue that I've got around the English market, if you excuse Chermiti for a second though, is we're shopping in Waitrose with an Aldi budget, right? So you're never going to get the best players from there. Having said that, I do think there's opportunities there. Like we've managed to get Gassama from Sheffield Wednesday due to their financial situation, Asgard from Luton because of their relegation and the clause that he had. We've managed to get some deals in there, which is the right thing to do. But when you start looking at Chermiti, and he's an Everton player and they don't have the same pressures or clauses to sell, you're going to have to pay top dollar, right? And it takes me nicely on to the second argument of this, which is, I had just hoped, right, that when the new management team took over, they would have an abundance of lists in front of them, right? They would have Niels Coppin's list that we should have the copyright on as well because he was employed by the football club. We have scouts, right? So I get Purdy and Thelwell's comments, but we pay for scouts. So you'll have scouts who will have their list. We've entered into an agreement with the 49ers Enterprise who will have a list that they are willing to share across. And then you'll bring in Thelwell and Purdy who will have their own list, right? And I was kind of thinking when they came in, they would put all those lists together and identify the best players. And I get that they want to move fast on some of the guys that they know. That's fine. We're talking about the last day of the transfer window. Surely in the time that it's taken to get to the last day of the transfer window, they've been able to go through the other lists and identify the other guys on that list. And that there is just one of my issues. And we've not done that. there's probably two kind of closing comments from me on this. So one is they've had to pay top dollar for Shamiti, right? So we might have been able to get another player who is a similar capability to Shamiti, but at a lesser price. We've ended up having to go and pay top dollar for him. You know, we're talking 8. It's probably 8 and rising. It's a lot of money, obviously. Thelwell made the point about £20 million net is what we've spent. That is an obscene amount of money. And we spend that kind of money, by the way, you expect to win trophies and never mind football matches. On Shamiti himself, though, I was thinking about this the other day. Niels Coppin and Philippe Clement were always kind of pointed for some of the more experienced signings that they made. They were the ones that you had to get right. Centre back, Robin Proper, a creative midfielder, Bayrami, a winger, Cortez. They're the ones that they got wrong, and they're the ones that fans always kind of hung on to. They forgot about the success stories. You know, we've just sold Jeffrey and Eagleman this summer for significant profits. They're the success stories, but people forget about that, right? I think Shamiti's going to be the one that everybody holds as a benchmark against Thelwell and Purdy. And if he does not perform, I think everyone's going to hang that on their door. And it's literally, you know, it's such a gamble for them to go and spend that amount of money on anyone, never mind somebody they worked with before at Everton who spent some time injured, who didn't score a lot of goals. In fact, he's not scored in 2 years, right? So when you're looking at it in black and white, you're questioning that signing. But we're not the experts here. But I tell you what, we become experts when he comes on that football pitch, and if he doesn't perform, you then say, well, we told you about that. And I don't want to say the word because Rob's got a swear jar already. But Shamiti needs to perform, otherwise that is one that's going to be held against Thelwell and Purdy.
So
Rob, not just Shamiti either. It'll be all the signings, because ultimately they're all done under their watch. And
it is, but there's always one player that people say, you know, if that's the majority of your budget, right? You spent £20 million net, half of that Shamiti. He needs to perform for that.
Absolutely.
Do you know one thing that I would add to that as well? And I've no idea what number Shamiti's taken. I imagine it will be 9, considering Dessers has been and gone. I've not seen anything to say that it is that or not, by the way. But I spoke earlier on about being of a certain vintage. And I think I've said for as long as I've podded now, which feels like about 800 years, there's the Rangers number 9 has to have something, a bit of pizzazz, a bit of sexiness. He just has to have something. But above all things, he's got to do his job up front. And we've spoke earlier on, and we've spoke for weeks now about how, do you know what I mean? Your strikers need to be scoring goals. They need to be. They might get one chance in a game, and he's going to have to score it. And I agree with Dougie. I think that the poor fella's going to have a huge sum over his head if he doesn't hit the ground running. And I don't know, Rob, for people looking in, and I've seen some bits and pieces in the comments on it. We looked at the Israeli chap, chased him for a good couple of weeks. Didn't seem to happen. I don't even know if I think the last time I heard he was going to the States. I don't know if he ended up there.
Same for the MLS, yeah.
And Shamiti came up largely out of nowhere from Thelwell and Purdy's old club. Now, I'm not suggesting the boy's a bad player, by the way. However, the first thing we all do as masters of all things Master Phil is we look at stats and we see, so you're saying a striker, the first thing you're going to look at is how many goals he scored. And the reality is, when you look at Shamiti's record, it ain't great at all. Majowski is probably the bright light of that transfer deadline day, or those last couple of days, if you like. But the outlay on Shamiti, Rob, concerns me slightly.
It doesn't. It puts a hell of a lot of pressure on the boy to hit the ground running, as Dougie said. The one caveat that I will give you, we could spend 50 million quid on a striker. If we don't create chances or get the ball into the position for them to score, the game's a bogey anyway. And I think that's the worry that we've got as a team at the moment. You know, Celtic was improved. We were still terrible going forward. We've still got to get better, moving the ball quicker, getting it into dangerous areas of the position more quickly, getting the wingers one-on-one, attempting to at least get the ball into the box for the strikers to create them chances. Until we see that, we'll never, an £8 million signing isn't going to make or break this team. It's the rest of the signings that are meant to be the creative force to create chances for them. And I think that's the thing that we need to see against Hearts, is that we need to see more of that happening, because if we don't create, none of our strikers are going to score.
Yeah. GT makes a great point. We only seem to be talking about the boy failing. He's not even pulled on his grip yet. Which is, listen, it's absolutely right. It's hard to disagree with that. There's a lot of noise.
I think for us as Rangers fans, it's just we're worried, because when was the last time we spent 8-10 million quid in a player? And when you look at this, as you say, when you look at the stats, it doesn't fill you with confidence.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there are multiple players that have come to Scotland having not scored anywhere else, but they've came here and scored an absolute barrel load. Yeah, so until we start to see him play, we'll give him, as Stevie would say, we'll give him the first 10 minutes against Hearts if he starts, and then we can make our judgment on him.
Stevie said there about the money side of it. So he's our biggest transfer since Tory Andre Flo. That's 25 years. And that's why everyone's a wee bit apprehensive around this. It's a lot of money, but the game has moved on since we signed Tory Andre Flo. You look at the English League, and we can't compete with English leagues, right? But they spend massive amounts of money. So this is a drop in the ocean. If we want to get a quality player in, this might be the price that we have to pay to get that level of quality in. And we might, to that comment that was brought up on the screen there, this might be a signing that we talk about in terms of this needs to be the Rangers way. You need to be spending £8-10 million on a guy who, he comes in here, everyone knows he's came with a reputation, he's a great player, you turn him around in 12 months for 20 million, and you just keep doing that. And hopefully that's what we are doing. And I tell you what, right, whilst we are all focusing on Thelwell from a kind of apprehension, if he gets it right, he gets it right, and he deserves the credit.
Yep.
And we'll all sit here next season and go, that was a brilliant signing.
Yep.
Well done, Kevin Thelwell. And do you know what? That then means that he buys a bit of buy-in from supporters, where if he signs another Shamiti in 12 months' time, you go, right, we're all behind you, Kevin, because you get that last one right. The problem we've got right now is it's a new guy in the door. We don't have that relationship with him right now where you can say we've got an established trust. So he needs to build that trust, as do the players on the park.
Absolutely, and you look at the Bruges model, just to cover that. They started off, 1-2 million quid a player, selling them for 5-6, then buying 5, 6, 7 million pound players, selling them for 15, 20. You look at some of the sales that they've had over the last few seasons playing in Belgium. That's the kind of model that we're going to need to adopt, whether we like it or not. And the fact that we've now got the 49ers group backing us is great, because it allows us maybe to jump a few stages of that. And Shamiti might be a great example of this, because no Rangers fan is going to want this boy to fail. We all want him to succeed, because if he succeeds, then it means that we're playing a much better system and we're getting results that we need. So we'll all be behind him. I think it's just it's naturally just the nervousness that a lot of people have when we look at stats and there's not a lot to go on from him. But he could turn out to be an absolute superstar, and this time next year, we're laughing about it.
Do you know what? I think for me, and we know about the outlay, it's huge money. We know about his stats, they're not great. I think if Rangers had maybe went into this international break with 3 wins and maybe a draw at home against Celtic, I think that the noise around it all is entirely different. But the reality is, and I think Dougie sort of alluded to this, is that all of our hopes are pinned on this fella to come in and hit the ground running, score a hat-trick against Hearts, take on Hibs himself the week after. And it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out with the new number 9, we think. Dougie, what I do want to speak to you next, and it takes us quite nicely on to Kevin Thelwell. He had an interview with the Club TV channel last week. Couple of things. I have to say, I thought Kevin Thelwell in the interview spoke really, really well. I thought it was quite refreshing. He was honest, admitted to it not being good enough. He was at pains to almost say how good a coach our current coach is on the grass, with his training and his general passion. I wonder what your takeaways from the interview were.
So I'm glad we've actually spoke about this in terms of, is Russell Martin the right man to manage Rangers, right? That's what I'm going to focus on, because Kevin Thelwell put his weight behind the manager. He basically said, we're seeing all the great stuff behind the scenes to get behind him. And he caveated everything around, we need to get the performances on the pitch. There's a lot of comments coming in around, doesn't matter who you sign, we've got the wrong manager to get the best out of him. right? I was very critical of Russell Martin, and actually after the Bruges game, I wanted him gone, right? I'm not going to hide my colours on this, so that's where I was at. I'm prepared to put my pitchforks away now because the club have backed Russell Martin, right? So I'm a supporter, a paying supporter. I go to Ibrox every week, right? I will voice my concerns if it arises again in the upcoming games. But you know what? What has happened now needs to be put in the past. We now need to go back into Ibrox against Hearts at the weekend, next weekend, and get back behind the players again. Let's try and get a wee bit of the toxicity gone from Russell Martin's Rangers team. We need to try and get behind them again. They've got the responsibility to get the fans back on side by getting a win, and that's why Hearts, when we talk about this being such a big game against Hearts, every single Rangers game is must win. You could argue that one defeat or one drop points doesn't alter a season. You can argue all different ways because so many games have gone down to helicopter Sundays and late drama. I think the league is there for the taking this year. I really do. And a large part of that's twofold. I think we have some good players in our team, right? We've spoken about Nico Raskin. Nico Raskin is a damn good player, right? He's playing for Belgium right now alongside guys like Kevin De Bruyne. You do not play in that Belgium side if you're not a good player.
Yeah.
We have signed some players. Antman's playing for, what's he, Finland? No, he's Finland. So you get Antman playing for Finland. You get Miovski playing for Macedonia. You've got Asgard representing Norway.
Yeah.
So you've got all these guys, all internationalists, right? That's the level of player that you have signed, on top of guys that we already think were good players. So therefore, I think we have a good squad. Celtic are a team in transition as well, and in a little bit of turmoil right now. I mentioned before the Old Firm game, they are not the best version of themselves, and you could say actually they didn't get what they wanted out of the transfer window as well. They sold Adam Reid and didn't make a replacement. So I think Celtic, they've had to release a statement because fans themselves are asking serious questions about their board. Brendan Rodgers will be looking at that right now, a little bit concerned that they've not strengthened what he wanted to build on. If we can get our shit together, I think we can really push for the league this season. And this is where it's important we get behind the manager just now, right? So the club are asking us to do so. They're telling us they are seeing all the right things behind the scenes. And I'm just going to talk briefly about David Gray and Stephen Naismith last season, because Hearts and Hibs were around the same league position at one point. One club sacked the manager, the other club backed their manager, and the one who backed their manager finished above the one who sacked their manager. And actually, David Gray is now a guy who's looking like, he's looking like a really good young Scottish manager. And that'll be because as supporters, we don't see the full story. You're looking at things on the pitch and you're saying that's just not good enough. The Hibs fans were saying the same thing about David Gray. Now, I am not comparing David Gray and Russell Martin, nor am I comparing Hibs and Rangers. But throughout history, clubs have requested managers to be sacked. Damn, there was a point that Man United fans wanted Sir Alex Ferguson sacked, right? So we're not seeing the full picture. If there's things happening behind the scenes that give the club faith in Russell Martin, he must be doing something right. And it's important that it starts coming onto the pitch, and that's what Kevin Thelwell said. But we need to just kind of put our pitchforks aside for a wee bit until 10 minutes into the clock against Hearts to get behind the club. We've got some new signings in the door. Let's see what they can do. I think it's really important that we see where we're at in a couple of games' time. I tell you what, after Hibs, you'll have a very good view on whether we still want to get behind the manager or we still want to chase him out the door. They are huge games for this football club and huge games for Russell Martin if he wants to win trophies.
I think you can buy into that, Dougie, if you see progress. And that's the thing that we need to see now. I think you look at the first block of fixtures, we regressed in the majority of those games, and regardless of what the manager does behind the scenes, us fans only care about the results on the pitch.
Yeah.
Ultimately that's the thing that's going to determine his future at the club. And if we don't see that turning quickly, then I anticipate that there will be a decision made, because the Europa League tickets ain't going to sell. If we get a cup run, tickets ain't going to sell. The stadium will start to be empty, and that's when the 49ers group will look at it. You look at Leverkusen, Eric Ten Hag sacked after 2 games.
Yeah.
You know, so there are clubs that do make decisions quickly. Now, I wasn't a fan of them. I didn't, but I got behind them. I think if we start to see progress come Hearts and Hibs, a lot more fans will start to buy into that process. But it's got to be done quickly. As somebody said in the comments, the time for talking's now over.
Yeah.
You know, all of this talk about how we're going to be a high energy, high pressing team, we need to start seeing it. And if we don't see it, then that's only going to increase the noise, I think, on the calls for his head, unfortunately, whether we want to support him or not.
Rob, what did you think of Kevin Thelwell's interview during the week? Did you think there was, as I say, I felt he spoke well. There wasn't really a lot that he said that I disagreed with. It was interesting to see that he kind of referenced the Bruges game as the match that's given them the most disappointment, which I thought was quite an interesting thing to say, considering we're 3 games in at that point and 3-1 eaches. Games that historically we would have probably taken 9 points from, to be honest with you. I just wonder, was there anything on it that you thought, I think he's well off the mark there, or he's in a ballpark of where I am? Interesting to know what you think.
No, like you, I thought he actually spoke pretty well. I think there was a couple of little things that he said initially that I think we were all probably puzzled over. The 20 million quid net spend that he mentioned. You know, I think that was the one that obviously grabbed a bit of the headlines. And I think once you take a little bit of a step back and you realise that he's probably talking about wages, agent fees, all that sort of stuff, it's not just strictly the transfer fees that are involved. Then
Loan
it
fees.
Sorry?
Loan fees as well.
And to be fair, that was the other thing that he talked about, using the loan market, and it's great because it gives you the ability to be able to try a player before you buy him. And I think only one of our loans has the option to buy. Now, ultimately, you can't buy all the players you needed to buy in a window, but I think there are certain things that we could have done, which is look at the option element to get them in the team, you know, and it's difficult to try and juggle, but that for me, I think, were the 2 things that had a little bit of a, not an alarm bell ringing in my head, but just a bit of a, what does he mean by that? Loans are a great way of being able to get a player in that you maybe normally wouldn't be able to, as long as you've then got that option to buy on it. And I think it's really good to see the Cornelius signing with that in it, because the stuff that Kai put out and the comments that he's made about his time at Malmo makes it sound like he's going to suit the team in the league very, very well from our point of view, and the number of aerial battles that he should win, which has obviously been a bit of a concern given our performance in some of the games this season. I think the other thing that was really interesting for me was he did mention a number of times about the results need to improve. And I think that's almost a little shot across the bow of the manager as well, to say, you know, Andrew Kavanagh and the board have kind of backed you at the moment, but there now needs to be some dramatic improvement. And, you know, as we said before we came on, Scott, you know, the window closing was almost like Clement's were going to get better in October, November.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
now is the time for us to actually see some of that in reality. So, no, I mean, I think it's always going to be difficult. They're joining at a really, really busy time of the year where at any other club, he could probably ease into it a little bit more. But the fact that we had so many players that we had to ship out and get in a short space of time to equip us for the first part of the season, I think that the interesting thing for me will be now how they approach things moving forward. You know, what markets are they going to look at? Because it can't just be about the English leagues. They've got to start to cast the net a little bit wider and utilise the scouting department and connections that we've got with the 49er group. And they've got time between now and January to be able to do that, especially even in looking ahead to next summer, looking at free transfers and pre-contracts that are going to be available and fit the system, especially in the defensive area, because ultimately next season you probably do need a right back, 2 centre halves and a left back. Yeah. So there's already going to be a lot of work to be done there, and proof's going to be in the pudding now with Thelwell. Talked a good game, but we need to see the action. And I think that's what most fans are going to be demanding from him is, what is he going to be putting in place, and how is he going to be building a structure that supports the mission moving forward, which is, regardless of manager, there is an identity that we've got as a club. There are players that we can identify that, regardless of which manager comes in, are still going to fit and be a part of that plan. And this is where the discussion that me and Dougie had around some of the comments that he'd made is that, yeah, our scouts will have identified a whole load of targets, but not necessarily for a style of play and for a manager with a profile of players that Martin wanted. So they're going to have to rip that up and almost start again. So I can see both sides, but again, it comes back to even what we're saying about the manager. Talk's cheap. It's the action now that we've got to see on the back of it. I think it was a decent interview. It was actually really good questions as well by the in-house media team. There was a couple that I wasn't expecting them to ask him, but the fact that they did was pretty good, and I think they probably knew they had to, based on the fan reaction that they've seen, because they'll be aware of what we are saying and what everybody's saying across socials and stuff about the manager and the club at the moment, and the fact that results haven't been good enough. So yeah, I mean, I'll give him a C at the moment if you're wanting to mark him, but we'll hope that increases over the next 6 to 12 months.
So I'll tell you what I'm going to do in the next 10 minutes or so. We are about to just speak a little bit about Hearts and Hibs that comes up very shortly. However, I can't let this afternoon pass without saying congratulations to Leanne Crichton winning her first women's Old Firm match this afternoon. 2-0 victory at their place. Mia McCauley and Ailey Austin with the 2 goals, and Kim, who is the signing that came in just a couple of weeks ago. And I saw her at Ibrox a fortnight ago making her debut against Hearts, and she was excellent. Looks a really, really good player. And well done to Leanne, giving us something to be reasonably happy about. For the first Sunday, I think, this season, it feels like, to be perfectly honest. What I am going to ask you both to do, now that the transfer deadline's shut, I'm going to ask you both to give me your best starting 11 between now and finishing. And if anyone wants to get involved in the Q&A down the side, then you're more than welcome to do that. I don't need to know formations. We can work it out ourselves. We're supporters. That's what we do. Dougie, Hearts obviously comes up at the weekend. Derek McInnes's Hearts, and it's unusual to think of Derek McInnes bringing a team other than Kilmarnock, I think, to Ibrox, and I have to say, really well supported by Tony Bloom during the summer, looks to have made good signings. I wonder if there's a team there that could genuinely challenge both ourselves and Celtic, assuming it ends up that way, for honours as the season passes.
So they shouldn't, right? And they shouldn't if we got our arse in gear, because we have spent £20 million net, and we already had a group of good players like Raskin and like Diamandi, right? So they shouldn't challenge us. The only way that Hearts challenge Rangers and Celtic is if we continue to drop points. So that's up to us to rectify that, and if we can rectify that, then we can go in and win this league, right? The whole point about Hearts, though, Hearts are a good side. They have actually signed well. We should be better than Hearts. We need to stop worrying about everybody else and focus on ourselves. And Nico Raskin has scored for Belgium. That is brilliant news. And do you know why that's so good, though, right? It's because when he comes back into training, he's buzzing, right? And the wee negativity that he might have had going away from Ibrox, he might come back with a whole new attitude of, right, I've just scored for Belgium, I'm on a roll now to get into that World Cup squad. And see if you've got one player who's desperate to get in a World Cup squad, he should be starting to make everybody else desperate to win, and it rubs off on everyone else. So that's brilliant news for Nico Raskin and brilliant news for Rangers as well. I lost my chain of thought, though. Hearts. We should be good enough to beat Hearts. Right?
Just to throw you off even further, there's a VAR check. There you go.
Oh, come on. That's Andy, right? So I don't believe for a second that that's right. I don't. He's doing that to wind me up. Anyway, right. So Hearts. In terms of the strongest 11, Scott, what I would say on the strongest 11 right now is the strongest 11 to face Hearts might not be the strongest 11 in 4 weeks' time. And what I mean by that is, I would be surprised if Shermite starts against Hearts, because he's just in the door. I know it's a lot of money. He's not adjusted yet to the league. Majovski is ready-made to play in this league right now. And as much as we all want to go 4-4-2, Hearts is not the game to go 4-4-2 in right now. And I just see our own Derek Johnson there talking about red flags. So that's £5 in the swear jar for Derek Johnston. Right, so I think we're going to go 4-2-3-1 against Hearts, would be my view. And I think that the team that we put out should be good enough to beat Hearts.
And are you going to volunteer that team?
Yeah, let's go for it. Right, so Jack Butland in goals.
Yep.
Let's look at this one. Right, so Jack Butland, they've got Magoma, Cornelius, Suter and Tav. Right, I'm going to say that's my defence right now. And I know there's two major talking points in there, right? Cornelius, then we should come in straight away because he is the experienced player that we all wanted. We kind of have neglected to talk about Cornelius because we've focused on Shermiti so far, but the manager spoke about signing experience. 27 is experience. We don't all have to go and sign 34-year-olds to get experience. He's a Canadian internationalist who's played a lot of football, and as Rob said, and point to Kai's comment, he's played in a system similar to us in a style of football where we demand possession, right? So I think Cornelius should come into the team. The partner of Cornelius is a real debate point for me. I think in games in the future, I think it will be Giga, but Giga's lost his mojo a little bit. I think he's been shaken a little bit. Suter was fairly solid for Scotland, by the way, the other night.
He was.
I would start Suter purely on the basis of he knows the league, he knows Hearts. He'll be able to help Cornelius come in, but it wouldn't surprise me if in our strongest 11 in a month, 2 months down the line, we're talking about Giga being the partner for Cornelius. Right back, I have said this since day one, James Tavernier is still our strongest right back.
Yeah.
We have spent money on a lone player who's way out of our financial gift, and Max Aarons, who is not as good as James Tavernier. So that is our defence, that's our midfield, that's our defence, that's our goalie. Midfield, I slightly disagree on. I think I would have Raskin as a holder because I've seen the comment about Rothwell. Hopefully Rothwell is doing bleep tests right now and literally running his arse off because he needs to get rid of some weight to contribute more than 60 minutes every week for Rangers. Nico Raskin needs to start. He will start number 6. For me, I said we'd play a 4-2-3-1, so I would have Diomande beside Raskin, similar to how he played against Celtic, where it was his best performance of the season, but beside Raskin, where they have a very good relationship. In front of them should be Asgard. We have not seen the best of Asgard yet, but every single noise coming out of St James's in pre-season was Asgard was a real good player. And people were saying about we should be judging Russell Martin on some of the jobs that he's had before. You know, we're not talking about David Gray. This is his first job. Asgard has done well at his previous 2 clubs. So we're bringing a guy in who's an internationalist, who's done well in the English Championship. Asgard should be given a wee bit of faith to come in. He might take a little bit longer to settle because of his style. Asgard has all the raw potential to be a damn good player. He's big, he's strong, he's good footwork. He just needs to give a wee bit more and calm down a little bit because he holds onto the ball a little bit more. Right, so there's my goalie, my defence, my midfield. I disagree with the strike force as well. I think Miovski will hold the line, as I touched on earlier on, because Shermiti needs to get up to speed. I think Miovski will be able to hit the ground running. I think Miovski made some really good runs against Celtic. I thought he looked really positive. He was dropping deep to link the play, but he was bursting a gut to get into the box. His movement in and around that box looked good. As Rob said earlier on, if you don't give a striker the ball, he will not score. We need to give him the possession though, because we didn't have any shots in goal against Celtic. So we can talk about it being a decent enough performance. We need to have more possession in the final third and creating some chances. He will score the goals if we put the ball into him, right? So Miovski will be our number 9. Gassama will start. He is our best signing so far. He's fallen away a little bit for me recently, and it could just be he's been doing a lot on his own. But he has an existing relationship with Magoma. I think playing Gassama on the left-hand side, building a relationship, building on the existing relationship they have, could be really fruitful for us. On the right-hand side, I think we should be really getting that man into that team again, demanding more from him. He's the player who started so well against Pilsen and just hasn't found his feet again. He's another internationalist. He's another good player. His stats before he signed for us is very good as well. I think he could come good in time. but we need to see that more for him. Interestingly, my last point on this, right? Interestingly, when you asked Rob the question around where did we fail to strengthen in the summer before the window closed, completely agree on the point about left back. Right wing was the other one for me. We obviously wanted Raksaki, and that went right down to the wire. If anything happens to Gassama or Ant-Man, or we need to change it up for them, we are relying on 18-year-olds. Now, Mikey Moore has cost us a lot of money to bring in on loan, so we need to play him, right? He looked okay against Celtic. It's the first time I've actually looked at him and thought, you know what, you can actually add value to our team, and I can see why you've signed him. And Finlay Curtis, for me, is a real bright light. I think there's a real good future for Finlay Curtis if we keep developing him. But I wanted another winger who was starting 11 level, that you could literally be like, we've got 3 wingers there and you could pick between any of them to start. So that's my 11. It'll be interesting to see what's different, and I'm conscious you're telling me about the time now because we have overran. So Rob, what would you change? What would you change in my 11?
I'd be tempted to start Cameron, to be honest, because I think work rate is a big issue. Asgard's coming back from an injury. He's going to need to get minutes into his legs. And while he did a decent enough job defensively against McGregor in the Old Firm game, I think we lacked a little bit going forward with him, to be honest. And I think Cameron's been pretty bright since he's come in. I would start Curtis on that right hand side again because of the work rate and the goal threat that he carries. You know, you look at how he started the season. I think he's more than deserved the opportunity to be able to get a start on that team. Pretty much everything else is what I would pick. I think Jiga and Suter's going to be an interesting one to see how that develops. I guess the only positive is that Suter's going back to his more natural right-hand side position, which takes a bit of pressure off him. But ultimately, is he still a player that's going to be able to be comfortable taking the chances and taking the risks that we need to in this potential style of play? But yeah, Miovski will lead the line. I don't see Chermiti coming in for that. On the point about wingers, I think the one thing that's been disappointing with me is that it has been that lack of work rate, because you would see, you know, the opportunity where you're 60 minutes into the game and the opposition are tired, when you could freshen things up by replacing Gassam with Mikey Moore, replacing Ant-Man with Finlay Curtis, and making those types of subs, bringing Chermiti on for Miovski, because they should be in a position where they've worked their backside off, chasing, harassing, pressing teams, to then refresh that line from 60 minutes on to be able to create more opportunities late in the game. And I don't think we've seen that yet, because that's been the one thing that we heard about when Martin was appointed, was that's the kind of thing that he wants is attacking players to do, is put the opposition under pressure, work them really, really hard, and then refresh those positions with fresh legs to really get at them in that final kind of 30 minutes of the game. So whatever happens and whoever is picked, the non-negotiables for me are the dirty stuff that we haven't done. It is the pressing as a team and not doing a half-assed press so that we can get played through in 2 passes. Yeah. It's making sure that we track our runners, because ultimately how many of our goals this year have been down to our own fault, with either not chasing a man back or switching off and creating making a mistake to let a kind of opposition team go straight through. But I think we are beginning to see a team that will settle, and you'll be able to name 8 or 9 of those starting 11 going forward.
Okay, so I'm going to read out some of the other guys that I've popped some in, and I'll finish off with the one that I probably agree with Paul, who watches us regularly: Butland, Tav, Suter, Cornelius, Magoma, Raskin, Diomande, Asgard, Gassama, Antman and Miovski. Chris, who is looking in on us, an X, Butland, Tav, Giga, Cornelius, the new lad, I assume he means Magoma, Raskin, Dio, Asgard, Antman, Miovski and Gassama. GT, who I think changes the formation slightly, go back 3-4-3. Butland, Giga, Suter, Cornelius, Raskin, Cameron, Asgard, Gassama, Antman, Chermiti and Miovski. So a 2 up top for GT. This is the team that I think we will go for against Hearts. Butland, Magoma, Suter, Cornelius and Tav. Raskin, Dio, Gassam, Asgard, Antman and Miovski. my gut reaction to looking at all of the bits and pieces that we've just discussed, frankly, is that, and I think it was one of the things that you said, Rob, to be perfectly honest with you, is we have the makings of a really decent squad. The importance now is just getting it all to click in the right places and at the right times. And I think for too long now, i.e. since game one, match day one, it just hasn't happened. And it's really important that come Hearts at the weekend, that it does. That seems like quite a decent and fair place to end. Dougie, grateful to have you on as always, buddy. Thank you.
I love the fact that before the podcast, we're like, it's an international break. We don't have a game to talk about. We've done it 45 minutes. Sorry, guys. It was good chatting. Listen, there's a lot in there that we've probably not dived into the detail of in previous pods because there's been so many other things to talk about. So good to get into some of the discussion points about Thelwell, about Martin so far, and hopefully the listeners have enjoyed some of that discussion tonight.
Indeed, and we can't blame Rich either because she's not here, so we can't take it out on her. We definitely can't. Rob, always good to have you back on for your second appearance, my friend. Well done, thank you.
Thank you, really enjoyed it. Always good to chat through all things Rangers, and no mention of a certain colour flag, which is nice.
I don't know how he's managed it, I'll tell you. Listen, so the build up to Hearts, of course, begins tomorrow. Stevie and the guys are back for the flagship weekly pod tomorrow evening from something PM. I'm not entirely sure yet. And we are back in 2 weeks' time. Don't forget, if you're not following us, please do that. Like and subscribe. Get our subscribers up as high as they possibly can as the season progresses. And as always, we're grateful to you guys for joining us. We will be back 2 weeks from now. Myself, Dougie, Rob, and Sheryl, by no means last on the list. Until then, have a great week. Have a great week after that. Bye for now. Bye.
The Four Lads podcast is sponsored by Rhino Express, Clydeview Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions Limited, and CSD Air Conditioning, in partnership with Black Rooster and Art of Gold. Thank you for listening to or watching the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.